All right. Also, if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there should be some type of button that allows you, that should say CC on it, that allows you to enable captioning for this program. I know for some folks, it's helpful to have that transcript going along at the bottom of the screen. I also want to say something that's like flown out of my head. So why don't I start by introducing myself? I am Natalie Belanger. I'm the Adult Programs Manager at the CHS. And what I wanted to say is that I am recording this program because we will be posting it on our YouTube page. It should take about a week for the file to go up, but you'll be able to see the program there. And if you would like to let friends know about it, please do that. So you can just go to YouTube and look for Connecticut Historical Society. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. And I really do thank all of you for taking your time to join us this evening. I know that for those of you who are in Connecticut, it is a gorgeous spring day, right? I don't know about the weather elsewhere in the world, but we do have people who registered for this program from Hawaii, from Tokyo, from the West Coast of the US, from Florida. So I'm guessing there might be some variation in the weather out there. But enough of me. You don't want to hear about me. You want to hear from our guest speaker tonight. And so Henry Q is a data scientist at Indigo Agriculture and National Turfgrass Evaluation Program. His main research focuses on data analysis and modeling in agricultural commodity prices, sustainability, and turfgrass cultivar evaluation. But luckily for us, he is also interested in history, especially in the immigration history of Chinese Americans. Following the legacy of the Chinese educational mission, Dr. Q came to the United States as an international student. He graduated from Rutgers University with a master's degree in statistics and a doctorate in plant breeding. So with that, I do want to just lay out there that the reason we have Henry here tonight is because he made a very fortuitous stop at the CHS a few years back to see if we had just kind of driving through Hartford and wanted to see if there was anything at the Connecticut Historical Society related to the Chinese educational mission. And we do have some things. And that began a partnership whereby Henry served as a translator and enabled us to mount an exhibition about the Chinese educational mission, which was able to bring new information about the lives of those boys based on their own letters and documents. So we're very excited to have Henry here. And Henry, take it away.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Natalie, for the kind introduction. I noticed there are people keep coming in, so I'm just gonna let you take care of that. So thank you everybody for your time. What I'm gonna talk about today is the stories of two brothers. For those of you who do not speak Chinese or don't really recognize Chinese characters, I have tried my best to do some of the translation. But if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. So as Natalie has introduced, I was trained to be a turfgrass breeder, but I ended up turning into a data scientist. Although my focus is mainly in modeling and analysis of agriculture, I'm also interested in history and arts. And most importantly, I was, and I still consider myself as an international student from China. I like to study to learn more of the, immigration history, as well as technology and everything. So with that, I do want to put out a disclaimer that this is my amateur's attempt, on a historical research. If there is any errors, and I'm sure there will be, I'll be glad to hear from you as well. And if you have any question, actually, feel free to raise your hand, and we can talk about it, during my talk. We don't have to save it all towards the very end. I plan to talk around 40 minutes, so I don't want you guys to forget a question. This part of the story, Natalie covered it a little bit as well. So it goes back to 2020, right before the pandemic hit. I graduated from Rutgers University and then was on my way to Boston to assume a new position at Indigo Agriculture. As you can see here, I stopped at Hartford to grab something to eat. And then I started to think about, oh, this is actually where Yung Win's family plot is located. So I went to pay tribute to him I have another slide to introduce Yong Wing later as an international student. And after that, I started to wander around, trying to find additional information about the Chinese educational mission. And that's how everything started here. And little did I know that about 150 years ago, some not Chinese students, some Japanese students who were studying in America right now, they did a similar trip like I did before. And in fact, they went to Rutgers and studied there. And then they visited, the whole New England area. So I mentioned Yong Wing in the talk. He depending on if you are a Mandarin speaker or a Cantonese speaker, Yong Wing is the pronunciation in Cantonese. And if you are a Mandarin speaker like I do, his name is Rong Hong. He's the first Chinese student to graduate from American University that we know of, Yale College. And then he organized, after he went back to China, he organized the Chinese educational mission, which included 120 plus students. As we started to discover, there are more than just what people believe was 120 students to study in New England area of the United States, beginning in 1872 and all the way to 1881, when the program was finally withdrawn by the then Chinese government. He's a naturalized U.S. citizen, but his status was later revoked under the Scott Act of 1888. And that was also the whole Chinese Exclusion Act and all that during that time. The stories that we will be covering today is related to three boys. As I mentioned earlier, there were about 120 boys that were brought to United States by Yong Wing, but three brothers that caught my attention. They came together with the Chinese educational mission. However, unlike all the other boys who were sponsored by the Chinese government at that time, they were self-sponsored. And after some investigation, it turned out that together with the Xu Zhenpeng of the 3rd Detachment, they all came from the same Xu family, a quite influential comprador family in the 19th century of China. With that, I do want to mention that I am a Mandarin speaker. So while the Xu family, they were Cantonese speaker, there has been an issue with how we understanding their translation, and then as well as matching their translation to the Chinese characters, because Chinese character is like a graphics. We cannot infer the pronunciation of it. So depending on where you come from, you can speak different dialects, and then that different dialects, when translated into English, can become different spelling, but they all kind of refer back to the same Chinese characters. And here, what are we going to talk about? And you will also notice that my pronunciation of their names are quite different from what they look like or how they pronounce as in English, because that was their original translation from Cantonese. And how I pronounce them is what a Mandarin speaker would pronounce. For example, this is a Chukayo in Cantonese, but I usually refer them as Xu Jiayou, and then Xu Jiaxiang and Xu Jiayuan. I was able to find a portrait of the three brothers before their departing in Shanghai, but unfortunately, I don't really know the order of the three. So it is most likely this is Jiayou, this is Jiayuan, and this is Jiaxiang, but it's very likely that the order is the other way around. But these are the three brothers that we will mainly talk about in today's talk. I mentioned the interesting translation story, and one of the most interesting things that I have discovered is just like us, they were struggling with the translation of their names into English as well. And then frankly, they were struggling with all kinds of different names, different Chinese name into English name, as well as English name into Chinese names. So they were being very creative. For example, during the whole time when I was reading through the letters, they sent back home and the letters among themselves, I discovered that there are two characters that seems to represent a specific location, but I have no idea where it is. At first, I thought it was somewhere in Japan, because Japanese people use some Chinese characters in Japanese as well, but it turned out it's not. But one day when I was talking with my Cantonese speaker friends, and they pronounced the two characters for me, it turned out to be Hak Fu. So that brings us to the center of all those stories, which is Hartford. And if you look at how they translate Hartford, it's a very interesting combination. The two characters, the two ways of translation are mainly phonetic translations, but in one of the ways, they add a mouth, a character indicating the word mouth to tell us that this is a phonetic translation. And then on the right side of the character is basically a phonetic translation, where these characters, the two are the same, it's Huck. Whereas those two characters, although they look drastically different, they pronounce as a fu. So this leads us to this. I thought this is an interesting story to share with you all about Hartford. Going back to the comprador, which is buyer in Portuguese, they were an interesting group of people. So the Treaty of Nanking in 1842 marked the beginning of a Western invasion of China. The opening of the treaty ports provided more places and opportunities for foreign merchants to purchase their callings. At the China end of the trade, they were facing a problem of establishing, conducting, and promote business. When free trade replaced the governed monopoly after 1842, they found it's really hard to contact with their Chinese counterparts. So given that difficulty, a variety of reasons made it necessary to employ a Chinese to work for the foreign companies, and those Chinese gradually become a comprador class. In recent years, there has been a lot of negative rhetoric toward this class of people. But for me, I really think they are the group of people that bridge the differences between the two cultures and leading to a better communication between the two, between China and the outside world, and also between different cultures that connects to China. The Chinese compradors, they serve as the trading house employees, managers, and sometimes even as independent merchants, and become an essential go-between between foreign traders and their Chinese counterpart. Although neither party possessed complete control over a comprador, the relationship seems to be mutual advantageous. Acting as a middleman between the two worlds, the comprador plays a strategic importance in modern China's economic growth, social change, and wealth accumulation. Over the time, compradors become extremely wealthy, and then they also become investors in foreign firms so that they can do business and then later on found their own enterprise. The first group of Chinese people that they are also, to me, the first group of people that started to step forth into the world and started to communicate with the outside world and become the pioneer of China's modernization effort. And showing here is a picture of how the same guy can wear different attires, and then this is how they talk with the different business partners and acting as a bridge to communicate between the two worlds. The Xu family is exactly the same. Their family business really started from Xu Yuting and Xu Rongcun, which are two brothers. They are both compradors for the same company. And then when Xu Yuting he started his business in Macau, and this also explains why the word comprador is originally from Portuguese, because Portuguese has long occupied Macau as a trading post with China. Xu Yuting started business in Macau when he was only a teenager, and then there he got to know an Englishman, Thomas Che Beetle, and as a partner of and later on become a partner of a dent company. And at the time, the company's main business was opium, silk, porcelain. And then after the first Opium War, then to become the first foreign companies to open business in Shanghai in 1843. And at that time, Yuting became their first comprador at Shanghai. And during this whole time, Xu Rongcun was with his brother, and he is the father of the three boys that we will cover today. And later on, the two also introduced Xu Run, who to be the succeeding comprador of Dent and Company, who later on took care of the three brothers, as unfortunately Xu Rongcun and Xu Rongcun passed away in a relatively early age. And one other family member of this, when I say family, I'm referring to the whole the big family per se. Xu Zhenpeng is also one of the members of the Xu family who was an official part of the Chinese educational mission, unlike the three brothers who are self-sponsoring students as they describe themselves. So the family's story started, as you can see here, started from this little part, the very southmost part of the China mainland, Guangdong province or canton. Their home village is right here next to Macau and also very close to Hong Kong. And Macau was leased to Portugal as a trading post by the Ming Dynasty, in 1557. That was a long time ago. So there were a lot of Portuguese people around there. And then after 1842, Hong Kong became a British colony. That explains why there has been such a long history of interacting with the West in this region. Before the Opium War in 1842, the Han system, which is a government a monopoly of the Qing dynasty, essentially controls all the interactions with foreign companies. They trained a lot of merchants, translators, and compradors, and then the position of a comprador in a foreign house is the most important one out of all those positions. Almost everything around the house, from examining the silver, which is the currency at that time, internal accounting, employment of servant, coolies, and cooks, and to interpretation of documents, to mediating with the Chinese merchants, are all the responsibilities of a comprador. With that said, it is safe to say that all Xu Yiting, Xu Rongcun, and Xu Ren all speak some level of English before they send, and I think that's one of the reasons why they send their boys to study in America. And actually, they also send some of their boys to study in England, as we later will find out. Although the Han system was eventually terminated after 1842, which is after the Opium War, the compradors will survive and started a new era of development, but in a different part of the country. So now they relocated to Shanghai, as Shanghai's strategic position, as the Yangtze River made it an ideal trading post for Western traders, both as a base of foreign regional trade or as a gateway to China interior. Shanghai's importance to foreign trade and Western presence in China was furthered by the results of multiple opium wars and then the subsequent treaties, which severely limited Qing's control over foreign powers. So when it was occupied by the British forces during the First Opium War, which is around 1839 to 1842, Shanghai numbered among all the treaty ports and opened to which later on becomes what they call the Paris of East. At that time, opium was by far the biggest import of the West. Industrialization of cotton productions in Great Britain and the United States destroyed the cotton industry in Shanghai. But at the same time, they opened a new opportunity. They opened the door for Western cultures and influences in this area. When I was reading the travel logs of Xu Ren, his footsteps was found, all along the Yangtze River. They had offices in Wuhan, in Yueyang, in Jiujiang. That's where they collect even in Chongqing. and that's where they collect, the teas, the Chinese tea, silks, and then ship it to foreign countries. We mentioned this. We mentioned Dent Bill and a company in Shanghai, which originally was the Dent company, and later on, Thomas Bill joined the company, which is which know Yuting very well, and that's how he become appointed as the first comprador of Shanghai. So there are a lot of Cantonese people moved to Shanghai as Shanghai opened up to foreign trade. The Cantonese in the early development of Shanghai had found themselves particularly had at a particular advantage in foreign trade as against other groups of the residents. Well, first of all, they are more experienced and better connected, as the area of Pure River Delta, the area right next to Hong Kong, Macau, it's well connected with the outside world, even starting from the Ming Dynasty. And the Canton had been open to foreign trade, for centuries. And the Cantonese merchants, some of them at least, they are able to speak certain level of foreign languages. And then the most foreign firms in Shanghai at that time only had it was only a branch of their main office in Shanghai, but Dent and the company was the first to open their own their main office in Shanghai. And also Cantonese people are more skilled in Western industries such as shipbuilding and ship repair, since most of the modern industries started earlier in Canton and Hong Kong. There's another reason that I think Cantonese people are more skilled as far as language skill. That is, Cantonese as a language is relatively more complicated than Mandarin. They have additional tones, that the Cantonese Mandarin doesn't really have, which give them some advantage to pick up other foreign languages. That just my speculation, though. Here is a map right after the first Opium War of 1842. The opium business was gradually, at that time, divested to Boston or Massachusetts to escape the British jurisdiction. But still, and as the trading center moved from Canton to Shanghai, those are still the main business that is going on between Great Britain, United States, and China. So the compradors, they were in charge of buying tea, silks, and porcelain from China, and then sell them to outside world, including the UK, the US, and then at the same time they are also in charge of importing opium from India. Most famously or infamously, the Eastern India Company. By the year of 1841, the trio's brother, so Xu Rongcun, has already replaced his elder brother to become the comprador of Dent and Company. Meanwhile, he runs his own business of silk and tea. One of the most important things that he had his brand on is this Qilihu silk, which is known by its good quality. And he started his own brand of Yongqi. And this is what he takes to the Great Britain for the first exhibition of 1851. In 1851, Great Britain stood at the very pinnacle of the industrial and cultural leadership of the world, but running in parallel was an undercurrent of a class inequality, a fear of foreigners, and also a contempt for internationalization. So against this backdrop, the First World Fair was organized as a means to united the nations and encourage economic growth through international trade and technology. On May 1st, 1851, Queen Victoria opened the Great Exhibition of the Work of Industry of All Nations at the newly constructed Crystal Palace in Hyde Park, London. Through the Great Exhibition, with its motto of peace, progress, and prosperity, Great Britain proved itself to be the first industrialized nation and the work of the world, but also the most powerful and advanced country in the world. And among the exhibition, there is a little Chinese pavilion. At that time, silk, wax, mineral, and fans and the Chinese teas were the main display in the Chinese pavilion at the Crystal Palace. It is a pity that there was very few details recorded about the Chinese display in the Great Exhibition, because it was just the time of Taiping rebelling. And then the Qing Empire was so exhausted that when the British Council in China got instructed from London that they should encourage China to participate, they were just not really interested. And but one of the compradors who realized that this might be a good opportunity to present his products to the outside world, and he is Xu Rongcun, which is the three boys' father, and he immediately packed up 12 packs of silks. Somebody said that he actually went there himself, and others said he just sent the 12 packs of silks, which I showed earlier, to London, and marked his silk good as Yongqi. And then after about 3 months of exhibition, the Yongqi exhibition was awarded a prize medal by Queen Victoria, which was recorded in the Illustrated London News, as you can see here. This is Yongqi of Shanghai. There's clearly some pronunciation, some spelling differences over there. But this was also recorded in the Xu family genealogy book, where they present the prize medals as well as a certificate from the exhibition. And after that, Xu Rongcun's business become even more popular, and that's how he become a lot of money. That's how he made a lot of money at that time. Some people said that he was actually received by Queen Victoria, but I was not able to find some concrete evidence. I was able to find this woodblock printing of Chong Ate. I don't know how this is pronounced, but you can see there is there is similarity between De Chong, which is another name that used by Xu Rongcun at the time, and he brought his wife and 2 of the concubines to meet Queen Victoria. But if he really made that trip, that would be a really remarkable trip. I was not able to find the information on how he got there, but I was able to find a ship that was that traveled from Hong Kong to London to attend the Great Exhibition in 1848, which was 3 years before 1851, and it took the ship 1.5 years and about 25,000 miles to eventually get to London. But with this, I want to showcase the kind of entrepreneurship, the kind of courage it took, that is embedded in this family, that they are willing to travel, that they are willing to risk, and to promote their own business. So Xu Ren, it was about 10 years when Xu Rongcun was in the position of the comprador for Dent Company, and after that, Xu Ren took over the position. He left for Shanghai via Macau at the age of 15 to stay with his uncle Xu Rongcun and Xu Yuting, who he was working as an assistant comprador, and eventually become the Shanghai office comprador from 1861 and 1860 to 1868. After that, he started his own business. It was interesting to point out that Yongwing or Ronghong was also a comprador for Dent and Company. That's probably how they got to know each other, and that's probably how Xu Ren later on worked with the Chinese education mission to recruit Chinese boys and send them to study in America. Xu Ren made so much money from the trading that he has a nickname of which indicating that he bought out half of Shanghai at that time, and he also created the Yu Garden, which is the garden where they celebrate, where they get together to see the three boys leaving for America. And then it was interesting that he has a Yu Garden at Shanghai. At the same time, he replicated the same garden in his hometown. So the same garden, but double the amount of fun, I guess. And this is also in Yu Garden when Xu Ren was sending the boys to America. Like I mentioned earlier, we know most likely it's from this order. This is Jiayou, Jiaxiang, and Jiayuan, and this is Xu Ren right here, and those are Xu Ren's sons. But it could be the other way around. Before talking about the three boys, I want to talk about their family. So this is a part of their family tree, as you can see here. Each line here indicate a generation. So this is his father Xu Rongcun. He went by another name, De Qiong here, which is their genealogy name. This is the name that they probably only use on their genealogy book of the family. He had one wife and 4 concubines throughout his 52 years of life, and he raised 8 sons and 6 daughters. All sons except Jiayuan, which is this one right here, was born by his wife. I suspect this is why Jiayuan doesn't really have a genealogy name. As you can see here, all the other boys have, showing here are all the boys. Unfortunately, at that time, girls are not allowed to be written on the family tree. As you can see here, when we look over this generation, all the boys have a similar character, Li, in their name, except for Jiayuan. I think that's probably indicate that the status of Jiayuan is probably is slightly different from the rest of the boys. And then later on in the letter between Jiayou and Jiaxiang, we also notice that he's a lot more closer with Jiaxiang than Jiayuan. And Jiayuan is a fighting, really has a fighting characters. And later on in his life, he would cut off his queue, which is a big no-no at that time. And he also refused to return to China after the withdrawal of the recall of the Chinese educational mission. And he stayed until 1882, which is 1 year after the recall of Chinese educational mission, to finish his education in America. But anyhow, by the time they come to the United States, Jiayuan was the oldest one. Jiayou was 16 years old, and then the other 2 were 15 and 14, respectively. What they have to do is first of all cross the Pacific Ocean. I was trying to find a map that indicating their trip. So luckily, I was able to find a map that was drawn by the guardian also the teacher of the 3 boys, Huang Qizhao. He's really a talented scholar. He not only drew this beautiful detailed map, and he's also compiled the first Chinese and English dictionary. So what they have to do is to cross the Pacific Ocean. Earlier, we have mentioned the Taiping Rebellion, which leads to a lot of social instability and poverty in South China. And as early as 1850s, Chinese immigrants first started to come into the United States, eager to escape the chaos in China that caused by Taiping Rebellion, and also try their luck in the California gold rush. Starting from 1867, the Pacific Mail and Steamship Company established a line from Hong Kong to San Francisco. It carried American merchants, missionaries, government officials to Asia, but made the most amount of money by carrying Chinese laborers, coolies, to the United States. So, and of course, as later on, in the 70s, as American economy slowed down a little bit and the competition for jobs increased, the coolies are being blamed for stealing the American jobs and then driving down the wage level, and that's how all the Chinese Exclusion Act came about. By the year of 1870s, there has been quite frequent connections between the two countries, not like the time when Jiayou's father went to the UK. The distance has been a lot. The travel time has been shortened a lot, and also with the help of some early Chinese immigrants. Did somebody ask a question? I heard something. Okay. And by some of the early Chinese immigrants who helped build the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, this also helps the boys to get to New England, taking the railway. They get on from San Francisco and then cross the country to New England. And later on, when they leave, they also take the same route, but they seems to take a left from Portland. Let me see if I missed anything. Okay. And just some additional information on the Transcontinental Railroad. When the gold rush ended, the Chinese Americans were considered as cheap labor. They first found employment as farmhand, gardeners, laundry workers, and most famously, as railroad workers. In the 1860s, it was the Chinese Americans that built the railroad, but unfortunately, we don't see any of them on this celebration picture. The building of a continental railroad opens up American West to more rapid development. And with the completion of the track, the travel time makes 300-mile journey across the United States cut into a matter of month, under a week. This also helps the boys to go across the whole country. I was not able to find the exactly journey that the three brothers traveled, but luckily, Huang Qizhao keeps a good record for the third detachment 1 year before the boys came to the United States, which was in 1875. So the third detachment leaves Shanghai, China, and arrived in Japan first, and then from Japan, they traveled across the Pacific Ocean to San Francisco, where they probably have some good interactions with the Japanese community. We are still able to find some of their post stamps that left by the boys in the collections of Connecticut Historical Society. But it is very likely that these are from the Japanese boys who were also studying here at Hartford. And then they were warmly received by the Cantonese community in San Francisco. And then leaving San Francisco, they eventually headed to Springfield. And then at Springfield, which was the headquarters, which was the first headquarters of the Chinese Educational Mission, which was later on relocated to Hartford. And then they started to send boys to their home states. It was the Commissioner of Education for the state of Connecticut, Northrop's idea to divide up students in groups of 2 to 3s and place them in American host families, so that they can so that it would both enrich the boys' experiences and expedite their acquisition of the English language. So after the third detachment, Huang Qizhao went back to China via the Great Britain, and then finally take the three brothers as well as the fourth detachment back to the United States again. When they first come to the United States, the headquarters of Chinese Educational Mission was in Hartford, which requires the boys have to come to Harvard in summertime to study Chinese, whereas Jiayou was stayed in somewhere in here in New Hartford. And then there are also Chinese boys who are studying in Winstead. Jiayou apparently had difficulty adapting to the new environment. So he was visiting a lot of the Chinese students in Winstead at the time, to the point that his teacher said he's allowed to visit the Chinese boys, but only once a month. And that was about 6 months after they arrived at Harvard. And it was also we can also find evidence that it was kind of difficult for him to adapt to the new environment, as a close friend, Chou Daquan, wrote to these are his original letters to Miss Atwell, which is the host mom for Jiayou, as Jiayou was having difficulty adapting to the new environment, and also he was writing to another friend that he couldn't find any pretty girls to talk with. And remember that he was only 15 years old, and coming to a totally new country who speak different languages, it is certainly hard for him to adapt to. And as far as the two younger brothers, we are not sure where they are, but we are sure that they are not with Jiayou, as we have collected a letter of them communicating with Jiayou. They could, I suspect they live somewhere in New Britain, but I don't have enough evidence to support that speculation. It was also funny that we find advertisement flyers for a herbal tea that brought by the Xu brothers that said if consumed, it can help alleviate sufferings from not accustomed to the climate of a new place. It was very interesting to me that later on, as the boys started to study in the United States, they end up going to the Centennial Exposition. Remember the ones that their father went to in 1851, that was in the UK. So this symbolized a rising power of the United States, where in the year of 1876, America have this centennial celebration by organizing this world affair to showcase the industrial development of America, mainly in machineries, as well as in landscaping, agriculture, and other stuff. Jiayou and two of his younger brothers went with Huang Qizhou, and then they were also received by President Grant, who also went to the Centennial Exposition. According to some of the documents, the boys, which you can see here, they were wearing definitely like Chinese shoes, but they also have a Western hat, and noticeably there is also a little queue behind them, indicating an influence of both American culture and the Chinese culture. Jiayou was also required to do his Chinese homework, and according to his teacher, he has to write 2 pages of Chinese characters and send it back to him. And his teacher, Huang Qizhou, will select some of the good ones and send it back to his cousin, which acted like his father at the time, Xu Run. And we have some of them. For this specific one, I'm actually not sure. I suspect this is actually a calendar or something like that. If any of you know about this, feel free to let me know. We also find a letter of Jiayou's brother to him, where the brothers ask him to practice not only speaking English, but also writing English to build his characters and understand the philosophies of what he was taught. And they also said, we send you some money, but you need to use wisely. We are all good and don't worry about this. If you tell me this is a letter that my mom sent it to me when I was in school, I'll totally believe it. It is the same story. It's the same wishes that the parents that had for their children's. These are some of the envelopes that we discovered. so from America, which is the country with the flower flags. So I guess the American flag seems very flowery to them at that time. So they call American the country with a flowery flag at that time. What else? And similarly, the teacher asked Jiayu to improve his handwriting as well, which you will see. This was, some of his improved handwriting, where he talks about he wants the teacher's new book, which is the first, as I mentioned, the first Chinese American English dictionary, and also Jiayu wanted him to know everything outside. At that time, Jiayu was studying in New Hartford, whereas Huang Qizhao was traveling, across the globe. And Jiayu also mentioned that he started to take up, math classes this semester, and he loved it, and things like that. Looks like I'm running short on time. Natalie, should we just cover some of this stuff briefly, and I'll open up for questions?
Yeah, that's fine. You go ahead.
Okay.
I want to learn about the cue cutting. So,
so this is related to the youngest one, which is the one that has the most amount of fighting spirit. He actually cut off his cue, and then Huang Qizhao has to write a letter to the host mom of Jiayu, tell him that you cannot do this, and we are particular in having such a cue. No matter where we are, we need to keep it. You cannot do. That's a big no-no to do that. So, with all that shows us the influence of American culture, and then this kind of Americanization also worried about the Chinese government, and with growing concerns over the students become too Americanized, such as they would dress Western attire, they would dance with the female students, they will go to churches, and then Jiayu actually end up adopting Christianity in 1881, I believe, and then cutting their cues. Those are all big no-nos to the Chinese government. And then in America at that time, there was growing hostility towards the immigrant. Chinese workers still in American jobs, the coolies are depressed. They get blamed for the depressed wage levels and all that. And one of the most direct reason, I believe, was the military academies refused to admit the Chinese students at that time, which is a big disappointment to the Qing government, because they were trying to modernize the military at that time. So after this incident where the West Point, refused to admit some of the Chinese students, all of the students were recalled, and a lot of them didn't even finish. Actually, most of them didn't even finish their study. But are they really Westernized? I don't think so. I like to cite Jiayu's writing to answer that question. In one of the letters that we found, Jiayu actually copied a Tang poem. In the poem, there are two lines that, when it's translated, become three lines. It said, "If my friends and relatives in Luoyang, which is the hometown, which symbolizes the hometown city, ask about me, tell them that my heart is as pure as crystal eyes in a jade bottle, untarnished by the world's fame and fortune." I think he's still the boy that he came, inside, but slowly he really becomes a scholar, as he later on write to his host mom that I want you to see Jiayu, your boy, to be a good and a useful man in the future. And sadly, he said, "Remember me to all," and with a happy new year. This was actually March, that indicates the Chinese New Year. And after that, we see two letters of Jiayu sending to his host mom, and then we never find any thing about that. But I don't want to leave the story to a sad ending. I want to share with you that on October the 4th, 2022, 150 years later after Jiayu's arrival, we get together with Jiayou's descendant at Hartford and Connecticut and put together this exhibition. I was gladly discovered that Jiayou's descendants keep that entrepreneur spirit in their family blood, that they came back to the United States and become successful entrepreneurs again here in the United States. So with that, I want to thank all the CHS staff members, especially Dr. Karen Lai Miller and Natalie's help. And if you have, and go make sure that you go visit our exhibition, whether the in-person one or the virtual one. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, and let's open it up for additional questions. Natalie, we have any questions? I haven't been following the chat.
No, we don't have any questions in the chat yet, but we did have a couple of people who shared that they were descendants of participants in the CEM. And I did put the link in the chat as well for people to go see that, the exhibit online, because you can do a 3D walkthrough of it online. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to speak up, or you can also put them in the chat.
I see. Well, I'm glad I did a good job. No questions.
It was great. Give people another second in case they have more questions. Go ahead. So someone, I'll just read out for people who can't see the chat. Someone mentioned that in one of the letters it references Jesus and how many boys converted to Christianity.
Among the three brothers that we know of, I think it's this one, that Jiayou, which is the main character that I keep talking about, he eventually said, I remember that, I have already given myself up to the love and the peace Christ. So he's the one that eventually started to believe in God. And there are also a lot of them actually adopt Christianity in the later stage of their life. So, but among the three brothers that we know of, Jiayou is the only one.
Maria has a question about were there any, would you like to talk about any contact you've had or with the families of the host, the descendants of the host families?
Unfortunately, I don't have a lot, but we did have, that's right, the descendants of Xu families are also here. And then, but I remember a couple of them went to the opening reception of our exhibition. They were sitting right behind me. So I turned back to say thank you, because I always feel like I'm one of the Chinese boys who end up being late for 150 years. Yeah, sorry, I don't have any, just to answer your question, I don't have any contacts with them, but CHS should have some, right? Mm-hmm.
Oh, so Maria is telling us she's part of the family of, she's one of the descendants of a host family.
Got you. That's great.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. I'm just curious about the items you showed us in this presentation. Where have you pulled? I know some of these are from the CHS collection. Where else were you able to pull some of these items from?
Most of the letters, well, actually all of the letters that I showed in this presentation are from the CHS collection. There are other stuff that I have read, or seen from other literatures. I have all of the reference here, and if any of you are interested in, I'll be glad to share.
We have another question in the chat from Debbie.
I don't really know. That's a good question. So Xu Zhenpeng was the in the third detachment. I don't understand the reason. Well, money is definitely not an issue because Xu Ren is a very wealthy businessman. So it's hard to explain why that is happening, but we know for sure that Xu Ren is all for is super supportive of such kind of activities, and he actually also sent some of his sons to Oxford University to study as well. Yeah. I think the reason I would speculate is because they were not able to. They have a certain requirement. Maybe the three boys were not able to meet the requirements. Yeah. I mean, that's again, that's just my speculation on that.
This is not a concrete question. This is really a Henry question. If you were able to talk to any of these CM students today, if you could go back in time or they could be brought forward to you, especially the Zhu brothers, like what questions would you have for them? What would you like to know that we don't know right now?
Wow, that's a really good question. I don't know. We can probably talk a lot. We can, a lot of their experiences, whether they stay with the host family. I myself have friends that I connected very well, in New Jersey, where they would invite me to go to, their house for Christmas, Easter. I remember all that when I was in school. And we share a lot of similar experiences, and also the boys went to skiing, things like that, which I did when I was in school. It's just a very similar trip. I don't think I feel like I know them very well, through the study, because I personally experienced all of that. I think we would definitely have a good time together chatting about our yeah. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
No, I put you on the spot with that question, but right. I mean, I think that the fact that you feel like you would have so much in common with them is actually lovely, because it is but
yeah, and also most important,
some things don't change, right? Yeah.
that's
and I guess kind of a related question, but this be more practical. So our exhibit is going to be open through oh wow, it's open through July. But the story of the CM doesn't go away, and I'm wondering if you were like, is there any further research that you personally would be interested in, pursuing on this? Like, what more would you maybe like to know that you think might be out there? Or do you hope that historians or scholars, because you kind of are busy with your actual, your career, this is your side hustle, what would you like for people to look into to kind of contextualize their lives?
Something else that I have noticed is that during this research process is there are a lot of documents out there that is not well preserved. So, and it's in urgent need, to have those documents preserved. And some of them are in individual household, and some of them are in libraries. I'm lucky I was able to discover, the ones, from the archive of CHS and having them preserved for future scholars. There are a lot of questions, I end up finding more questions than answers during this research process. It is important for us to preserve those documents for future scholars so that they can answer the question that we cannot answer right now. That's probably the most important thing. And also, I like to reach out to the descendants of the Chinese educational boys, as well as the descendants of the host family, to see if they have anything, any valuable information that we can put together to show the experiences of ordinary people. Ultimately, what I care about is not the power struggle of some empires, some big nations. Ultimately it's the individual people that bear the sufferings when countries are fighting each other, or groups of peoples are fighting each other. So I want to, through telling the story of ordinary people, to tell people, to remind people that we are all human beings. It's not just don't listen to the rhetoric those politicians put out there that leads to wars or extreme conflicts between different nations and a group of people. Yeah.
So are you sure you don't want to change careers and become a historian? Because I think you would be exceptionally good at that if that was your full-time job.
Thank you for the kind of words. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you can always fall back on it if the plant stuff doesn't work out for you. Though I'm sure it will. So someone, Debbie has put in the chat that biographies of all boys, she's provided us with a link to the cmconnections.org website where you can find biographies of the boys and their teachers.
That's right.
Yeah. So she urges us to bookmark this. So I will give folks a second to click on that and open it in a different browser. I'll say thank you so much, Henry. This was fantastic. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Thank you for your participations in the chat, especially Debbie, who's working really hard out there in the chat, providing us with these sources. And have a wonderful rest of your evening, everyone. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so much for your time.